Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas. I'm Josh Hinkle. Cutting your taxes. That's the promise behind a new bill filed by one Texas lawmaker. But some mayors are already warning that the property tax relief plan could hurt city services you depend on. Senate Bill 2 calls for new restrictions on the power of local appraisal districts to raise your taxes. It would put in statewide standards for the property appraisal system and create a board to oversee the property tax process. But the most controversial part of the plan would put restrictions on the rollback tax rate. Right now, cities can raise the rate up to 8% each year for maintenance and operations. Anything higher needs voter approval. Senate Bill 2 could cut that limit to 4%.
As values go up, tax rates never come down. So values increase year to year, and if tax rates don't decrease, then tax bills escalate by the same amount.
Austin's mayor says a proposed property tax cut would force the city council to cut essential city services. The city released a statement claiming the average Austin homeowner would see a tax cut of less than $3 a month under Senate Bill 2, but the city would lose more than $15 million from its budget. Mayor Adler said the cuts could put police, firefighting, and EMS services at risk. He said if the legislature really wants to help local taxpayers, it should better fund education because that's most of the Austin property tax bill. The plan for cutting taxes came in the same week lawmakers found out the state will go over budget ahead of the next legislative session. Legislative Budget Board staff and the state comptroller's office announced the downturn in oil prices is cutting state revenue. In the last few months, sales tax collections have been about 3% under expectations. The announcement put a cap on how much lawmakers can spend in the budget, and it's a lot less than last session. Many fear this will lead to major budget cuts next session. Lawmakers already had ordered many state agencies to cut their budget by 4%. The announcement from the 10 members of the Legislative Budget Board holds a lot of power. The board helps decide how much money state agencies receive. The heads of the state Senate and House, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and Speaker Joe Strauss, serve as co-chairs. 4 state senators serve on the board. Kelly Hancock and Jane Nelson are from that Dallas area, and Joan Huffman and Larry Taylor are from the Houston area. The other 4 members are state representatives. Dennis Bonin, John Otto, and John Zerwas are all from the Houston area. Drew Darby is from San Angelo. Every member on the board is a Republican. For perspective on the looming legislative battles over tax cuts and the budget, we turn to our State of Texas Roundtable. Joining us now, Audrey McGlinchey, city reporter for KUT, and Aman Bethija from the Texas Tribune. Welcome, guys. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
So let's talk about SB 2, that tax cut thing. Why aren't cities all in favor of this?
So it gets a little wonky, but I'll try to make it pretty simple. But basically, if this goes forward, it would limit the amount that cities could raise, the percentage each year that cities could raise property taxes from 8% down to 4% without initiating an election, basically. So, for example, Austin, this would cut their budget by about $15.4 million, which is a lot in a, what is a $3.7 billion budget. So I think it's Austin, I think also San Antonio, a bunch of other cities have come out and said, you know, we couldn't do this, we couldn't make this work.
Yeah, right. We saw Mayor Adler talking about lawmakers really need to focus on the school system to, if they really want to make a difference when it comes to taxes, right?
Yeah, because I mean, I think the argument is that, you know, schools get the majority of the property taxes, whereas the city, I think it's around 20%. So, you know, the city's kind of saying, you know, we're not the ones to blame here. So I think that's the argument.
You expect to see, you know, those city leaders like Mayor Adler up at the Capitol really lobbying against something like that?
Absolutely. And the interesting thing that I think is that the city kind of agrees with the findings in one regard, which is this question of how property tax values, how we value our property taxes, basically. And so the city has sued over that already. It was thrown out, basically. But one part of this bill would, you know, reassess how we value property, and something that seemingly the city would be on board with. But the part about, you know, cutting how much we could raise taxes by, not so great for the city.
Yeah, and another financial thing we've been talking about this week, certainly on a lot of lawmakers' minds as they're looking to put money in different places, is the spending cap. explain to people what this is, because it can get a little bit confusing.
Right. Spending cap is in the Constitution, and it basically says that the state can't grow its budget faster than the economy is growing. And for many years, it didn't matter. With the cap was set, and the money that lawmakers had was usually not really enough that there was a fear that they were going to hit the cap. Last couple of sessions, the cap has been an issue because so much money has come in that lawmakers had to decide: are we going to bust the cap? Do we have the votes to bust the cap, or are we going to restrain our growth to the cap? And so this week, the Legislative Budget Board met and set their cap, and it's at 8%, which is significantly down from last session. Last session, it was 11.7%. But the real amazing thing is it's at 8%, but there is not an expectation that there is going to be enough money to hit even 8%. So 2 years ago, they were at 11.7%, and they could have blown past it, but they didn't. This year, they're going to be at 8%, and they're probably not going to have enough money to reach that.
And what does that mean?
It just shows how much the economy has been hurting in Texas and how they're going to have less money than they did last session. So there's going to be talk of cuts in different parts of state government. Just as an example, last session, they went in with just $7 billion left over from the previous session. This year, there's going to be significantly less left over. In fact, there have been murmurs that there might be no money left over from the last session. So it's just going to be a much more belt-tightening session.
Where do you expect some of the big cuts will go?
Oh, that's a tough question, because right now you could argue there are all these supposed crises in different parts of governments. I mean, some legitimate concerns in CPS and foster care, but there's also, our school finance was deemed constitutional by the Texas Supreme Court earlier this year, but the Texas Supreme Court also said the school finance system is pretty terrible and the state should do something about that. But any chance to kind of reform school finance would probably cost more money. So I'm not actually sure where cuts will come from, because there's a group fighting to maintain their slice of the pie and everywhere.
Yeah, and you've already got these, kind of priorities that have been set out by the governor and lieutenant governor, so I'm sure that those will be the ones that they're focusing on funding right away.
And Dan Patrick has been talking about wanting to see more tax relief, so that is also expensive.
One of the things that everyone's been talking about also as one of those priorities is the sanctuary city issue again. Is there a sanctuary city? What is a sanctuary city? And Austin was one of the ones that keeps coming up, because I know that traditionally the Austin police have been told by the chief that we are not here to enforce the immigration laws. We're here to handle crime, and then it's beyond us. So now that Art Acevedo is leaving to go be the chief in Houston, what are we going to expect here in Austin after that?
Well, I think actually the real question is at the county level, because the question comes into play when we talk about who runs the jails, because those are the folks that are usually communicating with ICE. So we have a new sheriff coming in, which I would argue is more important when we talk about sanctuary cities. So we have Sally Hernandez, who has said she will not cooperate with ICE in a way that still current Sheriff Greg Hamilton does. And what that means is, ICE will say, hold someone for 48 hours, detain someone for a little bit longer so that we can come pick them up. And Sally has said that she would she hasn't said exactly what her policy would be, but she says, she might not be willing to do that. So, certainly Interim Chief Manley is important, and I think he's, expressed, the idea that, Austin is a welcoming city for all kinds of people, but I think the real question when it comes to deportation plays at the county level.
You've got all that funding. Will they get state funding and everything? Oh my gosh, like so much money.
I know. And then the question of federal funding, because President-elect said he would not like to, give money to quote-unquote sanctuary cities. So there's a lot of funding up in the air.
Great. Thank you guys for being here. This was great explainers.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Coming up, lawmakers move forward with a plan to save Texas taxpayers millions of dollars, but could it come with serious consequences for children who need help?
This is very rare for someone to say, I cannot vote for the person that the people selected.
Texas voters chose Donald Trump on Election Day, but what happens when one of the state's electors says he just cannot vote for the man? That story's next on State of Texas.